Okay, well, welcome everyone. I hope everyone can hear me and see me. I want to welcome everyone to this very important conversation. My name is Alexi Janulius. I'm the Secretary of State. I'm going to be very brief. We've got some great speakers today, but just as a little background, small businesses are the lifeblood of Illinois' economy, the backbone of everything that happens here in Illinois. So we're grateful to all the small businesses, all the small business owners that choose to do business in Illinois and across the country. Today we have a very important conversation about the Treasury and FinCEN's new reporting requirements. I want to thank Jonathan Dixon from the United States Department of Treasury for making time to be with us and partake some of his knowledge. But just know that our small business department is here to be helpful in any way, to answer questions, to work with all business owners, chambers of commerces, and parts of government throughout the state. So please ask questions. Tell us what concerns you. We're doing everything we can to raise awareness of these new requirements. And with that, I want to introduce Kimberly Hill, who's the Director of Business Services here for the Secretary of State's office. Thanks again to everyone for participating, and we wish everyone the best of luck. Kim?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kimberly Hill, Director of Business Services Department. I would also like to thank everyone for attending this webinar today. It's a lot of important information that we would like to share with you. It is truly my pleasure to be able to work in this administration. Secretary Janulius has really shown a true commitment to supporting the Illinois business community. And this webinar, along with all of the other communications, flyers, and notices that we've been putting out to make sure that businesses are aware of this requirement and that our businesses in Illinois are informed and compliant, is just a testament to that commitment. Again, it's a pleasure to be able to work here and be able to be part of this initiative. I want to give a special thank you to Jonathan Dixon from the U.S. Department of Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. He will be here today presenting and providing valuable information about the Corporate Transparency Act and this important new requirement, helping us understand the new rules, how they apply to us, who they apply to, and most importantly, how to comply. There's a lot of questions out there, and we're trying to do everything we can to bring information, and we really thank Jonathan. Again, he's a senior advisor for FinCEN. We really thank him for his time today and to be able to provide this valuable information. We'll be able to take some questions at the end, and this webinar is going to be recorded. We're going to post it on our website, on our Secretary of State Business Services website, so you can view it again, you can share it, and most importantly, it's there for all business owners and even folks who can attend today. So thank you again to everyone for coming, and thank you, Jonathan. I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you all. That was a great introduction. My name is Jonathan Dixon. I'm a senior advisor with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN, and I'm here today to talk about the Corporate Transparency Act and the beneficial ownership information reporting requirement that it has kicked into place. I do have a slideshow today, if we can pull up the slides. Perfect. So today I want to give a brief overview of the reporting requirements, why they matter, and what they mean for you and your small businesses. Next slide. So first of all, the rule that backs this is the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA. For years, a lack of transparency have allowed criminals to launder enormous sums of money into the US with basic anonymity. Anonymous companies destabilize local economies and undermine our national security. They compromise our national security. They enable serious crimes like drug trafficking, terrorism, and other illicit activities to take place within the United States. With the implementation of the Corporate Transparency Act, or CTA, new requirements mandate that many companies doing business in the United States securely report basic information to the United States government about who really owns them, or their beneficial ownership information. This framework is an important step to stopping the flow of illicit funds that hurt law-abiding small businesses, as well as protecting our economic and national security. Next slide. As of January 1st, 2024 this year, companies that fall under the beneficial ownership reporting requirement must file certain information about their beneficial owners with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or FinCEN. This is a bureau within the U.S. Department of Treasury that is leading this effort. FinCEN is an office that protects the U.S. financial system by supporting law enforcement and implementing anti-money laundering regulations. The beneficial ownership process that I'm going to talk about today is quick, simple, and secure. FinCEN will only share this information with authorized recipients for the specific intent of supporting federal, state, and local law enforcement, defending U.S. national security interests, and safeguarding the integrity of our economic system. But first, there are a few things that I want to flag upfront about these new reporting requirements. As we have developed the framework to implement the CTA, we've worked diligently to ensure that these requirements are not unnecessarily burdensome for small businesses. As was said at the beginning, small businesses are critical to our national economy, and we appreciate all the hard work that you do. And we really want to limit the burden that this rule puts on your small businesses. So, in order to help lessen the burden, companies that existed before 2024 have a full calendar year to file their beneficial ownership information with FinCEN. And newly created or registered companies this year have 90 days from the date of their creation or registration to file that information. We anticipate that most companies will have a straightforward reporting process and will only be required to report 1 or 2 beneficial owners. Thus, we expect most companies will be able to do this on their own without the need for an accountant or a lawyer, and filing is free of charge. We've also heard that it takes about 20 minutes for most companies to submit their information. Beneficial ownership information is not an annual requirement. Companies are only required to file once unless they need to update or correct the information that they have provided. At fincen.gov/BOI, you'll find all the resources you need to comply with this new regulation. You can find the link to report your company's beneficial ownership on this website as well. So today, I'm going to walk through the basics of the reporting requirements. Next slide. One of the key resources that we've produced is the Small Entity Compliance Guide, which is basically a one-stop shop for everything that you need to know about filing your beneficial information. And it's broken down amongst a series of key questions that talk about what you need to do to file this information. And I'm going to structure today's presentation around these key questions. The first of which is, does my company have to report its beneficial owners? Next slide. Starting with this foundational question, is my company a reporting company? In other words, does my company have to report its beneficial owners? Reporting companies can be foreign or domestic. The key question is whether the entity was required to file a document with the Secretary of State or a similar office when it was created or registered to do business in the United States. If yes, then the company might be a reporting company. I say might because there are some exemptions, 23 in fact, for entities like banks, credit unions, tax-exempt entities, public utilities, and certain large companies. The Small Entity Compliance Guide that I mentioned earlier contains tools to help you determine if you fall under any of these exemptions. Next slide. Okay, so let's say that you had to file a document with the Secretary of State in order to create or register your company, and you've determined that none of the exemptions apply to your company. The next step is to figure out who your company's beneficial owner is, so you can file that report with FinCEN. A beneficial owner comes in 2 types. It is any individual who directly or indirectly owns or controls at least 25% of the ownership interests of a reporting company, or who exercises substantial control over a reporting company. You can be a beneficial owner by virtue of your ownership interests, the substantial control, or both. I should note there are several exceptions to the definition of beneficial owner. Reporting requirements may look a little different for minors, nominees, intermediaries, custodians or agents, employees, inheritors, or creditors. Again, the Small Entity Compliance Guide has checklists and other tools that help answer any questions you might have on this. But let's first talk about these ownership interests. Reporting companies are required to report all individuals who own or control at least 25% of the ownership interest of a company. Ownership interest is fairly broad. It encompasses stocks, equities, capital, or profit interests, convertible instruments, options or privileges, or any instrument that is used to establish ownership in a company. And now on this slide, let's talk about substantial control. Companies are also required to report as beneficial owners anyone who meets the following criteria for substantial control. 1, the company's senior officers. 2, individuals who have the authority to appoint or remove senior officers or the majority of the board of directors. 3, important decision makers. Or 4, individuals who have any other form of substantial control over the company. That's obviously pretty broad. The compliance guide does have a lot of information about how to think about this concept. However, should you be unsure if an individual qualifies as a beneficial owner, it is better to err on the side of over-reporting rather than run the risk of under-reporting. Next slide. The next question is, does my company have to report its company applicants? Before we discuss what a company applicant is, let's look at the requirements. If a reporting company was created or registered before January 1st, 2024, then it is only required to report its beneficial owners, not the company applicants. But if it was created on or after January 1st, 2024, then the company is required to report its company applicants along with the beneficial owners. And a company applicants, there can be up to 2 individuals. The first is the individual who directly filed with the Secretary of State or similar office that document that created or registered the company. The second is the individual who is primarily responsible for directing or controlling the filing of this document. Sometimes these are going to be the same person. For example, a business owner who does all of this on their own would check the boxes for both those company applicants. However, maybe there's a law firm that helped you register your company. In that case, a senior attorney who directed a junior attorney to handle or create the registration, in that case, they would both be considered company applicants. Next slide. So now that we have a basic understanding of the reporting companies, beneficial owners, and company applicants, let's get into the information that you need to provide. First, you'll have to provide some information about the company itself. This includes the company's legal name, any trade name or doing business as name, the company's complete U.S. address, the state, tribal, or foreign jurisdiction of formation, and the company's taxpayer identification number or foreign tax ID. I should note that if you are a foreign company, you also need to submit the state or tribal jurisdiction where the company was first registered to do business in the United States. Next slide. For individuals, aka the beneficial owner and company applicant, you'll need just 4 pieces of information. That's the full name, the date of birth, an address, and the identifying number and issuer from a non-expired driver's license or passport, or an identification document issued by a state government, local government, or Indian tribe. If none of those exist, you can use a foreign passport. However, for all of these ID documents, you'll need to submit an image of the document through the beneficial ownership portal. Next slide. There are instances where instead of an individual supplying each of those 4 pieces of information again and again, they will instead report a FinCEN identifier. This is a unique number that FinCEN will issue upon request after directly receiving that information that I just mentioned. And although there is no requirement to obtain a FinCEN identifier, doing so can simplify the reporting process and allows entities or individuals to provide the required information directly to FinCEN. This is particularly useful if you have created or registered multiple companies and you want to supply your information once directly to FinCEN and then use the number for all of those subsequent companies. Please refer to fincen.gov/BOI for more information on how to apply for a FinCEN identifier. Next slide. Let's talk about when and how the company should file its initial report. So the reporting requirement came into effect January 1st of this year, and we began receiving those reports through our online portal. Companies that I mentioned at the beginning, companies created or registered to do business in the US before January 1st of this year have a full calendar day or full calendar year to submit that information to us. However, if you're a newly created or registered business after January 1st, 2024, you must report your beneficial ownership information within 90 days of receiving the notice that your company's creation or registration is effective. And beginning in 2025, newly created or registered companies will have 30 days to file. Next slide. All right, so your company filed its initial report, but something changed, and now the information you submitted to FinCEN is outdated. Maybe a beneficial owner sold all their shares, or the company moved across town. You'll have 30 days after that change occurs to update your report. You can do this by going to the same website I mentioned earlier, find the amend report button, and submit your updated information. Next slide. There may be instances where you need to correct a report. Once a company has become aware that or has a reason to know that the information is not accurate, it is also required to update this information within 30 days. So for example, if you filed your report and later you discover that you made a typo, or maybe someone's name was submitted incorrectly, you have 30 days to correct that report. And you can do this by going to that same website and clicking the amend report button. Next slide. Next slide. The question does come up, what if my company doesn't report beneficial ownership information within the required timeframe? We know that this is a new requirement, and FinCEN is taking steps to educate companies about their reporting obligations through activities like this outreach webinar, through social media posts, through a large ad campaign that we are currently undertaking. We understand that this new requirement takes some time to get used to. So if a company makes a mistake in a report and corrects it within 90 days of the deadline for the original report, the company can avoid penalties. And we are not looking for gotcha enforcement actions. However, willfully failing to report complete or updated beneficial ownership information can carry significant civil or criminal penalties. Next slide. So I've thrown a lot at you today. FinCEN is working to minimize confusion and support small businesses as they navigate these new transparency requirements. We've been closely monitoring comments on this reporting requirement, looking into inquiries that are coming through our contact center, and developing a bunch of resources to help small businesses navigate their beneficial ownership information reporting requirements. Some of the resources that we've made available include the Small Entity Compliance Guide, frequently asked questions, small business resources, introductory videos, and quick reference materials. All of these materials can be found at FinCEN's dedicated beneficial ownership information webpage, fincen.gov/BOI. You can also contact FinCEN with questions at our contact center, which is available at fincen.gov/BOI. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm happy to take some questions on this.
Hey, Jonathan, we have 3 questions that have been asked in the Q&A section. Once again, everyone, if you have questions, please insert them in the Q&A. First one reads, can I obtain a copy of the information presented on the slides for future reference to assist customers with accurate information regarding the topic?
Absolutely. I'm happy to send them an email with this web deck. I would also note that our beneficial ownership landing page links to some online webinars that are currently hanging on YouTube. We also have additional flyers and other resources that you or your constituents might find useful on the website as well.
Thank you. Next question reads, is this new law affecting undocumented business owners for their legal status in the US?
That's an interesting question. So if the company has been registered with the Secretary of State, you will need to file your information, which does require you to upload some form of ID. I can take that question back specifically about unregistered citizens or unregistered migrants that might be living in the country and operating these small businesses, but right now I don't have a direct response to that.
Thank you. Next one is, our company has any irrevocable trust that holds 47% ownership, who would need to be reported for that? Would it be all beneficiaries of the trust, or could it be just the designated trustee?
So we recently updated our frequently asked questions to reference trust companies directly. I would recommend that you go to the FAQ portion of the BOI website, and there is a question that speaks to trusts and how they should be expected to submit their beneficial ownership information.
Next question, are materials such as frequently asked question sheets available in Spanish?
Our small entity compliance guide right now has been translated into multiple languages, which does include Spanish. Right now, our frequently asked questions have not yet been translated into that, but the small entity compliance guide should be a good starting point.
Who will ultimately be responsible for any penalties, the reporting company or beneficial owners?
So the company is the one that actually has to submit the information, and therefore I believe they are on the hook for providing that additional information. But again, I would check the FAQ for that question specifically.
Next question. If you have multiple operating entities, LLCs, that roll up into a holding company, do you need to file a BOI for each entity or just the one holding company?
I believe it's each individual company, unless the individual companies fall within one of the exemptions that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation.
Next question. Is there a size limit to number of employees? For example, employers with fewer than 10 employees still have to register?
So this new reporting requirement is directed towards small businesses. There isn't a limit on how small the company can be. However, larger companies, which have more than 5 million in gross annual receipts and more than 20 employees, would fall under that large company exemption. If you'll go to the small entity compliance guide on the list of 23 exemptions, it gives you the full criteria for falling under the definition of large business that would not be required to provide its information.
Okay. Next question, if an entity formed in a foreign jurisdiction is registered in the US but does not have a physical location in the US, what address should they list as their principal office / place of business in the US?
They'll need to use the physical address, I believe, that they registered that first document with the Secretary of State to do business in the United States.
Next question is FinCEN looking for a particular percentage of ownership to be registered?
I'm not sure if I understand that question. The ownership threshold for being a beneficial owner via interest shares would be 25%. So if you own or control more than 25% of the ownership interest of a company, that's when you would need to report your information.
Next question is, if your business, LLC, or corporation is dissolved and no longer in business, do you still have to register?
So I know that we are working on an FAQ to address that exact question. Congress has defined an inactive business as exempt from reporting beneficial owners if it meets several criteria. That includes existing before January 1st, 2020, not having engaged in any active business, not owned by a foreign person wholly or partially, has not experienced a change in ownership over the past 12 months, has not sent or received more than $1,000 over the past 12 months and has no assets, including ownership interests in other companies. Specific criteria can be found in the rule itself as well as the small entity compliance guide, I believe. But there's also going to be an FAQ in future tranches that will speak to that question as well.
Next question is, are 501c3 nonprofit organizations required to meet the reporting requirement?
So 501c3s or nonprofit organizations do fall under one of the exemptions that I mentioned earlier, and that would be the nonprofit exemption.
Okay, and then next question, why does this need to be reported when you register a business? All this is already on record. Is it not?
I'm sorry, what was the last part? Is it?
Is it not? They're asking whether this is, so it reads, why does this need to be reported when you register a business? All this is already on record. Is it not?
So this reporting requirement, it was enacted by a bipartisan statute, the Corporate Transparency Act. And the guiding principle behind this initiative was that there is no nationwide registry of all small businesses and who owns them. Some jurisdictions, possibly the state of Illinois, have pretty extensive corporate records that show beneficial ownership, but others don't. So the reason FinCEN has created this beneficial ownership registry is that we can collect this information in one location that can be used by law enforcement and national security agencies.
A follow-up to the 501c3, what about 501c6 nonprofits? Are they exempt?
I believe they are exempt as well, but I would check the small entity compliance guide for the definition of nonprofit under that exemption.
Then we have a follow-up question as it pertains to the foreign entities. Follow up to the previous question, many states simply require you to list the address of the foreign jurisdiction and a U.S. mailing address, such as registered agent's address. Are you saying that the registered agent's address can be used for BOI reporting if the foreign entity has no physical location in the U.S.?
I will have to go take that question back. I don't want to speak out of turn. So let me take that question back and get a response.
Okay, and then we have another one that came in. Where do you get your, and maybe I'm mispronouncing this, is the FINCEN ID again? And is it a unique ID assigned to each individual registered entity?
So the FinCEN identifier, the application process can actually be found on that BOI website. That BOI website will walk you through the process of getting a FinCEN identifier, which is unique to every individual that requests one.
Those are the only questions I see right now on the chat box. I'll give it another 30 seconds for anyone that wants to, again, type any questions in the Q&A section.
Oh, Jonathan, this is Eileen from the Secretary of State's office. One question that we did receive that I'm hoping you may have an answer to is if there's a grace period for businesses. I know you outlined the deadlines in your slide deck, but for folks who may find out a little later, new businesses, for example, as they're post-registration, they miss that window. Is there a grace period for them?
So I wouldn't call it a grace period, but we are working particularly this first year of the reporting requirement on the education portion, getting companies familiar with the reporting requirement, getting to know who FinCEN is and what our mission is, and looking at all of the ins and outs of their reporting obligations. I will say that when new companies now file for an EIN or employee identifier number through the IRS, they are now directed to FinCEN's BOI portal to make sure that they register their information. So hopefully small businesses that are newly created this year are finding a number of these resources readily available that'll let them know that this reporting requirement is in effect.
Great, thank you. And we had 2 additional questions that came in. If the company moved from Illinois this year, do we still have to file a BOI report?
So the BOI is a nationwide initiative. This is something that every state that operates in the United States must file, regardless of what state or jurisdiction they live in, or operate in, rather.
Got it. Another question is, who has access to the information that is reported under this new requirement?
So we just finalized the access rule, but largely access is broken down amongst government agencies that have a law enforcement role, national security agencies, and certain large financial institutions that may use this for their own due diligence programs.
Great. Another question is, if there are board members who own less than 25% of the company, are they exempt? For example, 10 board members each own 10% and have no special influence. How should a business handle that type of situation?
So it doesn't sound like they would file under ownership interest, but they might have substantial control over the company itself. If they determine that they do not have substantial control over the company, then they would not be a beneficial owner for the purposes of the BOI reporting process.
Great. And then last question, why does this not apply to all businesses, including larger corporations?
It's a very good question. Larger corporations fall under a different set of regulations or have some sort of transparency obligation that outlines who owns them or provides substantial control over the company. It's really the small businesses that until now have not really had to have the same sort of transparency obligations that we are now looking at with the BOI program.
Great, sounds good. I will hand it back over to the secretary.
Thank you, Eileen. Thank you, Jonathan. And I want to thank all our participants. Again, if you have questions, please continue to send them our way. We're here to be as helpful as we possibly can. And please tell your friends, fellow business owners, anyone you may know about these new requirements. Thank you all again for your time.